The mentors is what I need. I listen to them every week. And if there is a voice that I see, then I'll tune in both times this week.
Welcome back to The Mentors.
This is Vadim.
And Sergey.
And you're listening to our weekly segment called The 5-Minute Pick-Me-Up, where we tell you stories to motivate you for the week to come.
And this week, we've been thinking about, the ebbs and flows and ups and downs of actually getting any project off the ground. And we realized how critical sometimes the initial moments of inspiration can truly be, and we shouldn't ignore that.
So the takeaway for this week, which we'll lead the episode off with, is this. When you are feeling inspired to do something, it could be anything. Let's take the example of an artist that is inspired to create a piece of music or a piece of art, right? Once that enters your mind, that idea, and you feel excited about it, that is exactly when you need to execute on creating that very thing. And there's two examples this week. Actually, one example where we successfully did that and one example where we failed at it and the repercussions that come from missing that window of opportunity.
And this week's episode is inspired by a quote that we heard on the Naval podcast, which is such a simple quote, just a few words, and that is that inspiration is perishable, meaning that it can come in one moment and flee in the next moment completely. And so you have to take advantage of it when you have it, because that can drive so many other things into motion.
So this Tuesday, I got home from the gym and I was getting ready to do some work to release our Wednesday episode. And I had been listening to the song on the walk home from work that I got really excited about, called Nice to Meet Ya by Neil Horan. And when I got home, I just thought, oh man, I'd love to do a cover of the song or something. I was just really feeling it. But then I also remembered that Sergey and I hadn't released a parody video in a little while. If you guys recall, we did a Macklemore parody video several months back that was about, what, Sergey? What the hell was it about?
It was about networking, funny enough. And
yeah.
I don't know, it was fun.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. We recorded the song and recorded the video all in one weekend and did the editing and released it. And we've been wanting to do more of that, but finding the right song that inspires you, that you can write different lyrics for, isn't that easy. But when I was listening to the song, I really got jazzed up, and I got home and I just got that inspiration, and I sat down and I wrote a brand new song. It's called Nice to Pitch Ya. All right, so as you can imagine, it's actually about sales. We're still reworking some of the lyrics, but I decided to sit down and just start writing because I was excited about it, and it took me about, 30 to 45 minutes to write sort of every stanza that I had in my mind in a way that flowed well. But it turned out pretty cool, and it launched in motion this new video that we're starting to work on. I also wanted to buy a new stabilizer for my mobile camera so we can shoot some different types of scenes, and I bought that thing right away, and I've been playing around with it since it came on Friday. So just that one moment of inspiration put into motion this new little project that we're going to work on over the next week or so.
And an example of when we didn't follow our own advice here, I think maybe just because we didn't realize the importance of it. We're doing an episode about it now. Hopefully we can learn from this too. But a couple of weeks ago, I started writing an article for Harvard Business Review. And as you know, one of Vadim's and I's goals is to write more. And we've been writing for Forbes and Harvard Business Review, but lately we just haven't had time to publish articles. And I've been wanting to write an article, and I started writing it, had a hard time really getting into it. But there was a day last week where I really got into the flow. I was able to figure out an outline for the article. I even started writing it, and I wrote about a third of it. And for some reason, I think I got distracted that night by something else, and I decided to stop working on the article that night. Well, lo and behold, I come back a couple of days later to work on writing that article, and I hit writer's block, and I couldn't figure out how to structure the story that I'm trying to tell, the thesis and everything of the article. And I put in almost a couple hours trying to figure it out, and I just couldn't get it started again. And it just proves that had I continued working on it when I had that inspiration, I already wrote about a third of it. I should have just seen it through and finished at least the initial draft. But because I didn't, I lost that momentum, and now it's taking me a little bit more time to get back into it.
And oftentimes creative projects like that do require an initial spark of motivation to start kind of getting the ball rolling, to get your mind thinking and the gears turning. But that initial point of inspiration should then afterwards be used as a launching point into figuring out other trigger points that can actually create continuity. So a great example for us, really simple one, is the show. A couple of years ago, over the course of a holiday weekend, effectively, we decided we're going to launch a podcast. We're going to record 3 episodes. And that was it. That was our sort of initial execution that we did on the motivation that we felt to create more content. And afterwards, as we published that content, as we started sharing it, as we started getting more and more traction, the continuity that came from it was from the audience, right? The fact that we had an audience that was expecting episodes every single week. But if we hadn't spent the time initially, and again, it wasn't even that much time, if we hadn't spent that time initially on actually leveraging that moment of inspiration, then perhaps the show would have never even happened.
No, I remember actually very clearly that we were sitting in our room thinking about starting the podcast, and then we're just like, let's hit record on one quick intro, 5-minute intro, and come up with the 3 topics. Let's do it right now, because we both felt inspired and we were getting each other excited about it. So we jumped on it right in that moment. Of course, what's important is then the commitment. So the reason why we kept on doing it, like Vadim said, is some accountability, but we also had commitment afterwards. And you do have to develop a little bit of discipline. Without the discipline, that initial spark isn't really going to last. But let's talk about some other examples, even just outside of our own, where somebody took an initial spark of inspiration that turned into a tremendously large business. Phil Knight, as you might know, the founder of Nike, initially did a project. It just started off as a project at school when he was at Stanford in grad school, that he was doing research on importing items from Japan. In the 1960s, Japan had just started to become a developing power again in the world, and there was some opportunity for imports, and Phil Knight had a simple idea. I'm just going to take half a year, maybe, or a year to travel. First, I'm going to go to Hawaii, but then I want to go maybe and explore Japan. And I've done a project on importing, and I want to see what opportunities might there be for importing products in Japan. Shoes and sneakers was something he was interested in because he was a runner. So first, he just started importing shoes from Japan and selling them at track meets. And eventually, he ended up owning the supply chain, and it turned into Nike over the course of about 15 years. So that initial inspiration and something that was a business that he worked on the side for 15 years turned into Nike just because he ended up going on a whim and saying, I'm going to take this trip to travel, and end up going to Japan at a time where very few Americans were going to that country.
So there's countless stories of entrepreneurs that get their start from an initial moment of inspiration, or creators or novelists. Whatever that initial moment is, you do have to capitalize on. So this week, try to put that into practice. It might happen tomorrow on a Monday, or it might happen towards the second half of the week where you already maybe accomplished something throughout the week, where you get a moment where you feel inspired to create something, whatever it is, right? To take a blank sheet of paper and a canvas and then build something from nothing on that canvas. Whenever you get that moment this week, don't put it away. Don't write a note, or don't set a calendar reminder for yourself to work on it later. Work on it right then. Even if it's just 30 minutes, do get started, because that moment of inspiration can be fleeting and you have to capitalize on it.
And remember that you do at some point have to decide whether you're going to commit to the project or not, if it's something that you want to see flourish in the long term. In the short term, that's less important, but commitment is what's going to drive the real results.
Exactly. And in the long term, you do have to find other ways of accountability or pull from customers or something that will then create the continuity that you need. That's it for our 5-minute pick-me-up of this week. We hope the content was valuable for you, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Bye-bye.